Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining in. I wish to start by thanking Greta Khoury for inviting me to do this presentation. I also wish to thank Jerry Leonidas and the team at the University of Reading for organizing this event, along with all their partners. My name is Greta Khoury, and the title of this presentation today is Finding Alef in a World of Seen. I will explain what I mean. Essentially, it's a collection of notes on my ongoing journey with the Arabic script, its forms, philosophy, and poetry. I wish to start with an invocation and a message of gratitude to the creator or creators of letter forms today, who strive to transmit knowledge and give life to the language of form and sound and the language beyond form and sound. So where to find this silent Alef in the world of or that is seen today, especially with social media? What is this Alef, first of all? Alef, as you already know, is the first letter of the Arabic alphabet. It refers here to the unmanifest or the subtle form, the underlying invisible structure for all the letter forms. Its proportions set the system uniting all the letters in the circle for which the diameter is Alef. It's like the spine of the letter form's body at the core of its spirit. Seen is another letter from the Arabic alphabet. It refers to the manifest or the physical form. I wish to think of it as a metaphor for all the visible forms, and they are proliferating today with technology. I start with a quote from the Sufi artist, calligrapher, and writer Samir al-Sayigh, who has been a mentor and inspiration for many of us designers in Lebanon and the Arab world. He said in one of his conversations, and I quote, "Khat served the project of life. It participated in the knowledge of the world's hidden structuring. Its practitioners looked at a tree and saw its structuring. They didn't look for its size or shape. They saw its hidden architecture. They respected nature as an inherent order." We can see this reflected in this manuscript from the 11th or 12th century in Eastern Kufic style. And we can see both structure and rhythm, along with incredible creative diversity and abstraction. The Lam Alef, for example, here, taking so many different flamboyant and organic forms. If we look at this calligraphic word, for example, I have contemplated it so often. It's abstract art, really. Its composition forms a rigid square with the vertical and horizontal lines. But the word is tufl, child, and the floral element contrasts with this geometry. It's so endearing here because it makes us think of a sprout, the metaphor for growth. I remember reading in a book called The Splendor of Islamic Calligraphy by the Moroccan poet and philosopher Abdel Kabir Khatibi. The Arab calligraphers consider their art as the geometry of the soul expressed through the body. This metaphor refers back to an established language of love. This is a good place to start. I'd like to share with you a bit of my story with the Arabic script in calligraphy and type today. Has anyone ever read or watched Eat, Pray, Love by any chance? It's the story of a writer who finds herself facing a challenging new chapter in her life. Her spiritual teacher in Bali tells her, "You will lose everything that you've accumulated so far, but don't worry, you will gain it all back. And you will come back here and I will teach you everything I know." Life happens and she starts to struggle on many levels. And so she decides to travel. She books herself 3 tickets. The first to Italy for food to nurture her body. The second to India for prayer to nurture her mind. And the third to Bali because she knows that she has to return there to nurture her spirit. Now, if only she knew that she could have saved herself so many tickets by simply coming to Lebanon, because we have the best food here. Unfortunately, a lot of religion, the most religion, but fortunately also ancient non-religious spirituality. And some really good beaches competing with Bali for sure. So eat, pray, love. I think we definitely need to play a little bit also. And this is what type has offered me on this journey. Now, you might be wondering, what is this of relevance? What is the relevance of this story in a talk about type and the Arabic script? Well, the story of the writer reflects in many ways my own experience with letter forms, as they traveled with me and I traveled with them from Beirut to London, then India, and now back to Beirut. Beirut is very far from being Bali, but they start with the same letters, so I'll have to live with it. In Europe, I've learned about this sense of practicality, the logos from the Greeks to the Renaissance to the contemporary business world. In India, I learned more about this sense of spirituality, the ethos of ancient wisdom. And in Beirut, it's a constant process of unlearning. As I've started teaching design and type, it's all pathos here. The country is facing its worst crisis, and we can witness the situation in the region today also, but it's a whole other story. And perhaps the most important story at this point in time. Now that I think of it, this story could be a metaphor for the journey of the script itself also, since it started on stone, right? With a practical purpose for inscriptions to record transactions or historical events. Then it flourished in architecture and mainly in manuscripts, with every possible art form across various civilizations, with the purpose of spreading the message of God. And today, we're going back to the roots of our script to keep it contemporary and relevant and ever-evolving and variable, etc. So the script is a living carrier of very ancient history and very contemporary technology all at once. And I found myself going back and forth between these two poles. All right, so chapter 1, a taste of type. I shall continue with how I got a very first taste of type. I found this note by Otto Eicher in one of my sketchbooks. Writing systems are political, and typography is just as rich a source of cultural insights as gastronomy. I'll add to this a source of personal insights. The history of the Arabic script feels special to us in Lebanon because we have been taught that the origin of Semitic writing systems came from this land with the Phoenician alphabet. And so it seems that it would make sense for my journey to have started in no other place than Beirut. My early exposures were multiple and very enriching, quite overwhelming, I must be frank with you. First of all, at home. My mother paints and draws with very expressive lines. Her forms and images often have no words, but very expressive ones. They speak of war and memory, music and identity. I remember how my mother, who was also my art teacher in school, introduced us, the whole class, for the very first time to a calligrapher. Mohsen Ftouni wrote our names one by one. My father also draws and writes. As a pioneering author of the art of comics in Lebanon, his graphic stories have words. He handwrites a lot in a form of personal calligraphy. Then started my education at the American University of Beirut with Layla Musfi, the founder of the first graphic design program in the region, introducing us all to the basics of graphic design and typography, first and foremost with an intuitive approach. Inspired by her education at Cranbrook Academy of Arts with Catherine McCoy, Layla Musfi was and is still the godmother of postmodern design in this country and the region, and the first woman designer to create designs which explore the meeting of Arabic and Latin type, calligraphic and typographic forms. Here you can see poster design and album covers by Layla Musfi, as well as publications, which for the 90s in our part of the world were absolutely groundbreaking. In her class, we were encouraged to experiment and play and find our own voice with type in both scripts, Latin and Arabic. We're fortunate to be exposed to prominent figures like Wolfgang Weingart and Cyan and Jonathan Brarbrook, who were invited by Layla to the department for workshops that we attended. In parallel to this, Samir El-Sayegh would introduce us to Arabic lettering and the drawing of Arabic letters. There was no formal teaching of Arabic calligraphy, but we were very privileged to get exposed to the influential work of the master calligrapher who plays with the script in all its forms, as you can see here. Geometric as well as organic brushstrokes. So I had to imbibe this enormous wealth of art and design from all around me, all kinds of sources of inspiration. So now started my work experience at Al-Muhtaraf, a design studio in Beirut, which I joined in 2003. And this studio had a very strong visual culture. So it was also like a school in my experience. This is me here, 20 years ago, in front of a very fat screen, contemplating tiny letter forms, digital letter forms for the very first time. The artist Camille Hawa was the creative director, passionate about language and art and all the abstract forms related to language and letter forms. With Yara Khoury as the design director at the time, they were already collaborating together on many Arabic typefaces. And with them, among many other projects, I started to draw letters with intent. We were using one main font for text on everything at the time. And we clearly saw the need for Arabic typefaces. We started to collaboratively design and develop fonts. They were all custom designs for clients, ranging from the corporate to the cultural, mixing cursive and geometric designs. So this is the sample of the very first font I designed with Camille Hawa called Watat, my very first experience on Font Lab with Yara Khoury training us for that. We were really self-taught, so we had to read and learn by doing. This is a typeface that was designed for the Saudi Hollandi Bank in a family including display and text. This was done in collaboration with Yara Khoury. Another for a sports magazine for the youth. And this is one more example I'm showing here, which is an Arabic extension for an international commercial brand, which Christian Sarkis actually started working on when he joined us as a very fresh graduate at the time. So this is Yara and myself sitting in front of this typeface and developing it extensively. So this took a considerable amount of time, but it was very interesting because it was an exploration of cursive forms and typographic outcomes. And funnily enough, today I'm seeing this typeface used on all kinds of things, very commercial stuff, book covers for kids, all kinds of book covers for various novels and various publication houses, and things like fast food wrapping papers, some items that I found in Biblos, in a souk, etc. Here is the very first, it was very interesting also that the very first printed piece I designed at Muhtaraf was a mailer for in-house and custom fonts. And funnily enough, the project what got me collaborating with Camille Hawa was also something related to that. So here you can see the mailer, and we were trying to grab any opportunity to share fonts and inspire others to do the same. And so just now, as I came to Beirut a couple of years ago, again, the project that got me connecting with Camille Hawa again was an exhibition and a booklet about his typefaces that showcase the letters, the type design work that he's done spanning over 3 decades. These are examples of the typefaces that Camille Hawa has designed and that have been very influential to all of us who worked with him at Al-Muhtaraf. 2 decades ago, type design for Arabic started to have an increasing appeal in commercial projects This was a time when the practice of type design was looking at supporting multiple languages to cater to larger markets. The support for Arabic language meant that typefaces could meet the increasing demands of Arab countries and also open a platform for exchange and collaboration. 2 Arabic type design projects came my way while I lived in London, among a variety of projects that I have done, but these were milestones for me. They capture well also the landscape of Arabic type a decade ago. One was a display typeface for a branding project for Turquoise Branding, a branding agency based in London. This was done under the creative direction of Gareth Mapp with Charlene Pierce. It was conceived and drawn by myself with Gareth and Charlene directing this project. And then it was developed by Tara Atrisi Studio as a collaborative project. It was part of a rebranding program where the custom typeface became one of the essential elements to revamp the brand with a new strategy that was conceived by Sharon Wheeler and the team at Turquoise. You can see here the development, of all the characters and the extensive process of feedback for the development of the full family. Another project was a type family for text that was inspired by the Stulus script of calligraphy. And this was for Research Studio under the direction of Neville Brody. I invited Christian Sarkis to join me in the process of both design and development. This project was all about researching the classical script and connecting with tradition in practice sheets by calligraphers. So we started looking for clues in the work of master calligraphers, and we wished to bring more richness and variety to the character set. By getting informed and inspired from these sources from these examples, to not only design the letter forms, but also to start to create alternates and ligatures. So these are a few glyph studies. It was relatively new to us at the time, and it became a collaborative research as much as a commissioned project. I'm showing the research process a little bit, some testing sheets, and the resulting ligature and alternates, which added up to, it was a family of 3 weights with 325 glyphs per weight. These are the ligatures and the alternates, just a few of them. Now, these projects made me clearly see how type was facing the interesting challenge, but also the risk of becoming a commodity in a world driven by certain models of economy and fast-changing technology. I wish to remain true to my personal quest and stay connected to design in its essence. What was most interesting to me was the enormous potential of the Arabic script to change faces and contain infinite forms of expression. The letter forms demanded attention to detail and understanding that a unit exists as part of a greater whole, all of which encapsulated a very powerful and abstract sense of aesthetics. And for this, I had to travel back in time and contemplate the legacy of Arabic calligraphy. And so the second chapter of my journey begins. So the grand return to calligraphy. The Abbasid Vizier ibn Muqla, scholar, master calligrapher behind the canons of classical calligraphy, said, and I quote, "I like the man who cultivates poetry for self-instruction, not for lucre, and the man who practices music for pleasure, not for gain." I must admit that I'm not really a type designer. I have designed a few typefaces in the past, and very joyfully, very seriously also. But I have not focused my attention solely on this practice like type designers do. And this was at a time where the technology was not helping either. I would never be able to claim that I'm a calligrapher either, because there's a long-standing tradition in our part of the world for calligraphers to be recognized as such. So I wish to consider myself a graphic designer, or rather a graphic explorer, I would say, fascinated by both these worlds. I seem to be at the intersection of these two, the calligraphic and the typographic, oscillating between the two. Perhaps I'm actually at the edge of both worlds, unable to take a proper leap into one or the other, as if knowing that devoting myself to one would make me lose the other. But the common denominator for both is the word graphic, and this is where I find myself. When asked about those who inspired him, Samir al-Sayigh replies, they were very few. Abu Hayyan al-Tawhidi speaks of khat as an architecture that is difficult and onerous to make. Balance eludes us. He's talking about formal relations. Letting one form dominate another upsets the balance. To make balance, you must be well learned in the language of forms. Ibn al-Bawwab says, if you want to enter the world of khat, you must give up your wife, your children, and your friends. You must surrender your mind and senses to reach anywhere. And who knows if you really will. You cannot traverse the distance quickly. In my case, so many master calligraphers have offered inspiration and guidance and continue to do so. As mentioned earlier, Samir al-Sayigh, who was my professor at the American University of Beirut, and Ali Asi, who used to come to Al-Muhtaraf studio in Beirut to conduct sessions for the whole team in writing the Nasakh and Diwani scripts, the script of the scribe and the script of the empire. And it was fascinating to learn the difference between the two. Then Ahmed al-Mufti in Syria, who is also one of the few calligraphers to master the art of illumination. And he has published many books on these subjects. He has also designed a game for children to explain to them how Arabic letters are constructed with common and simple shapes. Then I was very privileged to meet Hassan Shalabi in Turkey, where I discovered the lineage of the Ottoman school of classical calligraphy. And the wealth of resources available is immense the moment we start looking and researching. And I find it everywhere in books. And, all sorts of resources around me. I keep practicing by looking at the work of masters of the past. I remember Hassan Shalabi telling me when I visited him in Üsküdar, لماذا تبحثين؟ يجب أن تكتبين. Why are you researching? You must simply practice, simply write. And I can't help it. I keep researching along with writing. This is one of my practice sheets. A few samples of the sketchbooks, the notebooks that I keep when I'm reading and studying in my own free time. There was this little piece of tracing paper that I found in one of my albums. With time, I got to know that it's one of the masterpieces of the Ottoman calligrapher Ahmed Karahisari. It remains a major source of inspiration for me. In how creative and innovative it was for the 16th century. The Musalsal script here adds to the meaning of this verse, which says, praised be he who praises, alhamdu li waliyi alhamd. So the looping visual becomes a concept. I've often looked at how to connect lines and dots when drawing words myself and the musicality that results from this. Then, of course, there's this very famous masterpiece by Master Karahisari, combining his unique Bismillah design in the middle of two square Kufic designs, which displays so well the enormous potential of going from a freestyle, fluid cursive to a solid geometric and the contrast that the two bring when juxtaposed and superimposed, in a composition. The Bismillah of Karahisari got me into researching the various designs of this single verse. There's a gorgeous book on the subject, and here are some collected variations across history, which are a tiny specimen of the very extensive library. I contemplate how the design can go from being very studied, almost like a mathematical exercise, to becoming very painterly, like in the work of master calligrapher Al-Qandusi. From being an exercise in clarity and legibility to a complete abstraction. And I'm particularly mind blown by these very intricate designs of unknown scribes. Now, after this, I will share a few samples of my calligraphic pieces with a lot of humility, actually. They are mostly digital pieces. I love to write with the pen and the ink, and I do this every chance I get. But as I sit a lot on my computer, I make use of that tool also. These are variations on the word love in a freestyle inspired by Diwani. A few calligraphic names. So here, exploring, experimenting with how to connect letter forms with lines and dots. These are compositions that explore concepts of unity, movement, musicality. They're often inspired by verses from poetry, Sufi poetry. These are Arabic sayings, or again, quotes by Sufi poets like Ibn Arabi, for example, and the last one. This calligraphic composition says, heaven is under the feet of mothers. This one, and we've made from water every living thing. This one says, facilitate, do not complicate. And this one, if the oppressor continues with his oppression, his end is inevitable. If the oppressed perseveres in his resistance, his victory is inevitable. So I'm always inspired by Sufi writers, for sure, but also Lebanese writers like Mikhail Naimi. I'm also inspired by thinkers, influential thinkers like Edouard Said, to do these calligraphies, in my free time. Now, following up on the theme of reverence and gratitude, let me tell you something that I learned in India. In 2014, I traveled to the south of India with the desire to volunteer in a yoga center, or what is called an ashram there. Just before the pandemic, when the design department knew that I had some experience in type design, they asked me if I could create a typeface for the script that they used in their communication. It started with the handwriting of the spiritual teacher that everybody loved and respected. A few devotees were able to capture the spirit of the script and write it dynamically. I met some of these artists, and I saw the pride, the joy, the gratitude, the devotion they carried in handwriting everything from small name tags to poetry on walls. So I could not bear the thought of a typeface replacing this. And I knew that the day a typeface would be created, again, as joyful an experience as this would be, hand-painted fabrics or palm leaves, wood sherds will be all replaced by lifeless printed boards. The artist would not be able to offer their skills, and they would not receive in return smiles of appreciation for their work. So for the very first time in my life, I consciously chose to decline the design of a typeface because I sensed that I would not regret this as much as I would regret changing the ecosystem of the people in this particular environment. And so I joined them in writing with ink and painting by hand. In their silence, letters are signs that speak of those who have conceived and invented them, those who keep drawing or recreating them. and those who have unlocked their mystery, listening to the knowledge that they carry. It's fascinating how these tiny signs like particles can speak of the individual and the universal, the personal and the shared, the technical and the mystical. And so we continue our trail to the third and last chapter of my journey, a continuous love of letterform design. One thing I did explore in India is the world of ancient kolam designs. This art, unique to Tamil Nadu in southern India, is practiced by women who create on a daily basis and in no time very elaborate and at times very complex designs based on a grid of dots, a very simple grid of dots, generating a variety of designs. They do this with rice flour on the floors in front of their houses. So it prompted me to start investigating the construction of kolams, but also of letterforms for Latin and then Arabic, following the same system of a continuous line contouring dots. This is fascinating because it needs to be done by hand, and it gets very complex if we want to create words with one continuous line surrounding these dots. It can definitely be computer generated or even coded, but you can't understand it unless you draw it by hand. And it becomes a very meditative process, actually. Now here the grid will connect to everything I will speak about later on. During my MA studies at the London College of Communication, the first project was about form and meaning. And the form that I got to work on was the triangle. We had to explore the potential of one basic geometric form and explore meaning through it. The main carrier of meaning for me was, of course, the letter form. I was faced with a challenge back then, how to make the letter forms fit a rigid grid, a rigid geometric grid. Quickly enough, the main challenge transcended form. It was a matter of visual and cultural communication. What was more crucial was to make the Arabic language, the script, and the culture that it carries accessible to other cultures. The exercise was to bring the script, the language, and the culture closer to a new culture, which mostly associates this script with classical forms of calligraphy rather than contemporary geometric forms, for example. So it was an exercise in shifting paradigms and asking questions like, does type create cultural stereotypes? Can it break cultural or visual stereotypes? And the key seemed to lie in the purity of the geometry, which could generate letter forms for any given language, after all. On the common foundation of a grid, the letter forms could easily start to speak different languages and involve different cultures in a dialogue. Both form and dialogue mattered, and there was a visual tension that started to develop because the meeting space was interestingly very formalistic and therefore not natural to each script in its original form. Then research at the London College of Communication with leading professors Ian Noble and Paul McNeill led me to the Arabic Calligraphy Museum in Damascus. It's a small, hidden, beautiful space filled with a very rich and unique collection on all kinds of supports. You see here a few samples of manuscripts and exercise sheets by master calligraphers. And then the very rich collection of epigraphic inscriptions on stones. The design proposal was an excuse to study the content and the collection hardly visited and tap into the collective experience and history which the script in all its forms offers here. Now, how could design help me communicate the relevance and importance of a calligraphy museum in this part of the world? Once again, letter forms came to carry this task. At first, I started drawing them, whatever I could find on stones and paper. Then I thought about their structure. And the grid started to come back to me. It became more complex, inspired by arabesque designs. It was gradually leading me to a modular system of letters for both Latin and Arabic, and even more characters if I wished to. So this practical project ended up being a visual identity for the museum based on a modular typeface made of abstract parts generated by a grid reminiscent of Arabist design, as I was saying. When the war erupted in Syria, I explored versions of this typeface where units would disintegrate, compromising comprehension. I often wonder, what are we doing to our alphabet and our culture today? So continuous letter play. I keep my reference books at hand, and the ones about calligraphy are too many, way too many. I have plenty. It's the most precious collection of books that I can have. I'm also very happy to see that the books about Arabic typography are increasing, and I know that it's our responsibility to do more there. This is the book that has inspired me very often, by Huda Abi Faris, published back in 2001. I'm also inspired by the publications of my professor from LCC, Visual Research by Ian Noble and Russell Bestley, and of course, the seminal work on the visual history of type by Paul McNeill, published recently in 2017. We're very lucky at the time to be able to be exposed to the work of Mer McNeill as a studio. We had Philippe Appelois and the master himself, Willem Kraul, visit us for lectures while we were in London. And today, I design letters when I feel the need to study something or express something. But at the time, it was more of an experimental approach. I was ready to play with these letter forms, just seeing how far this whole experiment can go. So I'll show a few of the projects I worked on while I was in London in 2009. So this is a fractal kufi, where the letter forms are built again on a grid. And it was interesting to see how the fractals can become more complex to create different kinds of letter forms. Another form of kufi based on the muthallas, the triangle, instead of the square that we're used to, and an exploration of various forms. This one made use of the circle, half circle, to create a kind of a playful modular typeface. And today, I continue to play with letter forms because they bring me a lot of joy, whether they come to life in organic calligraphy or digital forms, as you see here. These are a few more samples that are more recent of modular typefaces and letter plays. This is an exploration of a pixelated typeface called Pixel Arabic in three-dimensional form. These are pieces of lettering that are self-initiated projects in response to a variety of events. A few calligraphic, lettered letter designs for the names of women who are pioneers in the field of women's rights in our part of the world. A variety of compositions, more abstract in nature. This was an interesting exploration in getting inspired from black letter to use in Arabic lettering. That's the word Palestine in that particular lettering, and that's the word free. So the calligraphy of the Arabic script will continue to hold a crucial place in my work, but also in education today. It will remain the entry point to Arabic type. With Yara Khoury, we endeavor to have calligraphers join our introductory type course at AUB. We can see Ali Asi here again. The conversation about language and exploring a meeting of culture will also to continue in projects where students experiment with multiple scripts and study dual language typography. This is especially in publications, in our publication course. With Leila Musfi, the open and freeing experimentation with type and typography forever continues in advanced courses, and I feel very privileged to be in her presence during these courses. The love of letter forms becomes almost infectious. And I must say that with my mother, Retta Naufal, my family environment also, especially with my mother, because she's been an educator for 40 consecutive years now, it's the ultimate exploration of form and color, the musicality of the line, and the poetry and power of the image. So to conclude, in spite of the fact that we come from a country of mixed identities, cultures, languages, I only felt like I was designing something of true significance when it was in Arabic, or I should say, when the Arabic script was involved. It was not exactly about the language that I speak, nor the script, nor the identity, but rather about something which felt a little bit more fundamental, letter forms, with emphasis on the second half of the word. In their geometry, the forms capture time and timelessness. They do speak of the underlying structure of the universe. And my own spiritual teacher says, everything in the universe, from the atomic to the cosmic, works the way it does because of geometric perfection. So this Arabic script, its letters, its history and potentialities will remain my sanctuary. I feel that I have so much to share about letters that they have silenced me. They invoke histories, memories, imaginaries that can fill so many pages that they have blanked me. Perhaps the nature of Alef and its secret after all is to form, inform, and transform without being overly seen, but definitely heard, as the songs of great calligraphers will continue to resonate. Thank you to all those who have contributed to the journey, and they are many. I thank you all